If you're watching this, it's because you're like us. You love running and you want to keep doing it without interruption. But frustratingly, life isn't that way. It can throw curveballs and any number of things can derail your running journey. And here's the kicker, they're not always running related. But you're all good, we've got your back. We're going to take a journey through the main non-running stresses that can negatively affect your running. And we're going to talk about the 4 qualities that you can work on in order to solve these issues like the runner that you were born to be. A lifelong learner is a lifelong runner. So here's what I'm going to do in this video. The things that I'm going to talk about, the suggestions that I'm going to give you are not the way to do it. They're the way that I've worked out how I can do it, in the hope that maybe you can find something that works for you. It's worked for me, it's worked for Mary, it's worked for people that we know, and it's worked for people that we coach. These are just about giving you tools and seeing what sticks. So these are what I think are the 4 key skills, 4 core skills or attributes that you need to have in order to be a runner that are not to do with running. And the first one is to be able to zoom out and see the big picture. Secondly is to treat your whole journey like a puzzle and to be a problem solver. Third is to be adaptable and to be able to adjust. And fourth is to be able to find balance in your life. And we're going to talk about how you hone, how you craft these skills using situations that can knock us out of running that are not running. They're situations that have happened to me, that I've seen happen to a lot of people, and it's about working out how you deal with them to get yourself back in, and crucially, how to make sure that they don't happen again in the same way. And the first non-running setback that I think is really important to negotiate, and probably the most topical right now, is how on earth do you come back properly and safely after an illness? And it could be flu or cold, or it could be COVID, which I've just had. So this is my second run back since COVID, and I'm going to treat this run pretty much the same way that I treat all of the runs when I'm returning from illness, but maybe with a couple of little caveats. But the first thing that's pretty much a non-negotiable is you cannot go back straight away to where you were before you got ill. It's not a sensible decision. That's not how fitness works. That's not how COVID works. So it's almost, certainly for me anyway, it's about taking my ego, putting it in a box and saying, you're not playing a part in this. This is almost like a business decision. I'm going to start right back, way back, and I'm going to ease myself back in gradually. I'll be able to catch up quite quickly, but I'm certainly not going to be going back to running a half marathon today or something. This is an easy 5k, not getting out of my base zones, really being, I suppose it's about being humble to the process. What we tend to underappreciate are the longer lasting effects happening inside of our body that we can't necessarily see or even feel all of the time. Take COVID, there's significant strain on the heart and lungs and inflammation in the body, so your heart rate is likely to be elevated when you return to training. You can't just go back to normal. You're healing and you need to be kind to yourself. Expect runs to be hard, heart rate to be up, breathing to be more difficult, and adjust for that rather than trying to power through with brute force. That's a quick route to another setback.
I think the reason that I'm feeling alright about this kind of slower approach return is obviously I don't want to set myself back because I've been ill with COVID, but also I know I've got a 100-kilometer race coming up in December. But ultimately, if you zoom out beyond that, I want to be a runner for the entirety of my life. So actually, yes, it'd be nice to be perfectly ready for the 100-kilometer race, but as long as I'm not setting myself back again and making myself not be able to run, then that makes me happy. And actually, I think I will be able to make the 100 kilometers because yes, I was supremely fitter last year at around this time, but I was training for a race in July, so I started training hard in January, whereas this year I'm training for a race in December, so I'm just starting my proper training now. That's the way it's working for me, and I think it's gonna be all right, but I have to just make sure that I make the right decisions for me and my health rather than being ready for a particular race, because there are many more races that I'm going to be able to do in my life.
The other most common stressor in running that isn't actually running is injury. And you'd be forgiven for thinking, how can not doing anything cause additional stress? Well, you'd think that until you get injured. But I don't want to talk about the mental stress of injury. I think we all know if we've been there. It's definitely Mary's least favourite version of Ben.
the injured one. But the reason I've said we need to get good at problem solving is because injuries do happen, but rest is quite often not enough long term. You have to start playing the game, solving the puzzle. What got me injured and how can I prevent it from reoccurring? Because if we just rest, then the likelihood is that when we come back, the same thing could happen again. So to be a problem solver is to treat the injury with the consideration it deserves. Is there a muscle weakness or imbalance somewhere? In cases of overuse injury, usually there is. And how can we solve this? Strength and conditioning is a great start. Address the weakness. It could be yoga, body weights, Pilates, resistance bands, but I've found often I need more, expert guidance. I visit people who may be able to help me solve the problem. I've had gait analysis, osteopathy, physiotherapy, massage, and if I want to come back from injury and prevent it happening again, then I go all in. I now do it even when I'm not injured. I call it prehab. It's solving the problem before it's even a problem. The thing is, I learnt a long time ago that often where the pain presents or where an injury happens is not the source of the issue. It's simply the weakest point of the chain that gives way first. So a calf injury doesn't mean you have an issue in your calf beyond the injury. It could be a tight hip causing it, it could be a misfiring glute. So revel in the puzzle. Will it go wrong again? Maybe, but it is much less likely if you take a proactive approach to your journey. If you keep picking up injuries and only resting, then I hope this has sparked a fire in you. You're in control of this, so control it. And reduce your risk of injuries as much as you can whilst still enjoying that puzzle. That learning process is part of being a runner.
How about being adaptable? Because I think that's going to be an important quality for me today. I'll explain why. So to prove our point, we're going to Bali today, and we're literally going to Bali just to prove a point. That's definitely why we're going, but we have to go here first. Before I talk about how we're adaptable, it's worth saying something that I've said a number of times on the channel is that it's treating every session like it's absolutely crucial, but at the same time, no session is crucial, is an important approach, is an important part of this, but I'll explain why I think that travelling in particular and the different forms of travel that you can do can derail our training if we're not careful. Travelling can have so many effects on our body that we might not even consider and could therefore impact our training if we're not careful. What we sometimes don't even factor in can be our downfall. When we travel, we're often in unusual positions or situations, and on this journey alone it was 4 hours sitting crammed on a plane seat and then 3 hours standing queuing at customs. Elevated stress equals stress response, an increased heart rate, adrenaline or cortisol release, muscle tension, and even listing this now, I know that if I'd have attempted a run today it would not have gone well. And it doesn't have to be a holiday. Holidays are rare, but longer commutes or journeys to places that take a while can be every bit as risky without having a plan in place. While we know that sometimes you simply don't have a choice and just need to make it happen, I would advise that when you do have a choice, get good at being adaptable and adjustable. And the good news is the power to do it is with you.
Oh, that was a big day. Cheers. That's definitely taken its toll, by the way. That's about 12 hours of travelling. But in order for me to explain how adjustable we've been and how we do it, I need to swing back to the starting point of this section, was that we treat our training like every session is critical and yet no session is critical. And what that really actually means is that we just aim to make every single session. That's our mindset. We never think ahead and think, I'm going to miss this. But if we miss a session, it's okay. It happens. That's life. And as we've already spoken about, we know traveling takes a huge toll on the body, especially something like this, like a holiday. But even 2 to 3 hours in a car will take its toll. It will affect your heart rate, which could in turn affect your session. So there's no problem with either missing the session, or what we tend to do is we know when we're traveling, we plan ahead and we plan a day off for that day anyway. But if not, if you're caught out, if you have to travel at the last minute, just take an extra day. There's nothing bad that's going to happen from taking that extra day. Remember, we're talking about the zoom out mindset. And once you get all of these things working in tandem, you're keeping yourself in the game long term, and that's what we ideally want, right? And finally, let's talk about how you find balance in your life, which is, let's be honest, it's the was it the $1 billion question? I can't remember. But finding balance is probably something that we're all searching for all of the time, all striving towards. Because let's be perfectly honest, if something in your life, work or social life, tips you over the edge in terms of stress, then that is absolutely going to have an effect on your running. And it could be something as simple as physical stress. It could be that you are an office worker, you sit in an office all the time in a chair that's not right for you, and that can affect your running. But it could be also that you work manually, that you have a really hard job for 7-8 hours a day, and then you're expected to just be able to run with no side effects. These are both physical things that can have repercussions that drift into our running, and that's just the physical. What about the mental? What about finances? What about relationships in your life? What about children? What about the mental stress of your work? Now, if you're expecting that mental stress from your life is not going to bleed into your running again, then I think you've got to be very careful, because these are non-running stressors that are absolutely going to affect your running if you let them. So how do we find balance in our lives? I don't know, but I'll tell you what I do. First of all, I use an app called HRV for training, but you could use an Aura ring, a Whoop band, you can use a number of things that usually the heart rate monitors on your wrists, on your watches nowadays can do the same thing, but track my heart rate variability, because heart rate variability, without getting into it too deeply, is a way of tracking not just the training stress in your life, but the stress in your life. And it's a way of kind of predicting when you're too stressed to train and offering you advice to dial it back, to make sure you're keeping yourself safe and not overstressing. But that's the sciencey part. There might be bigger life things going on, and honestly I don't have the right answer, but I can only tell you what worked for me. And I read a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and in that book there was an exercise that you had to do where you kind of have to peel back the layers of your life and try to work out what is driving you, what's your overall thing, the thing that you kind of strive for in your life, and then you have to put all of the other things that you do in your life and work out whether the things under the why, let's call it, are pushing you towards the why, or whether they're detracting and wasting your time. And then it's essentially a spring cleaning project. Anything that doesn't push you towards your why, your life's goal, you try and get rid of from your life, and that should at least help a little bit of balance. It's very in-depth, I'm not going to go into it right here, but I would suggest if you're interested reading Grit by Angela Duckworth, because it really helped me at least clarify what I was doing in my life, and that way could lead me to be focused and take away any type of external influences that weren't leading me to where I want to be, and therefore, I think, the stress. Because now the stress that I do have is stress that I invite on myself and I'm okay with, because I know it's pushing me towards where I want to be, if that makes sense. And you know what? We're a constant work in progress. So even if you start the process of trying to work on all of this, of trying to solve all of this, of trying to help yourself, then you're on the road, you're on the journey, and that's all we can ask for. And you can, fingers crossed, get yourself to places like this.
Because look at where we are now. We're out on a run on a Wednesday morning in Bali. And if you can see, you probably can't see down there, but there's the sea. Everything is right in the world. We're taking it super easy. You know, we're not pushing at all, are we? We're keeping it in completely base zones, even walking up hills. But it feels good because this is part of the comeback. This is part of the process. This is about those 4 core skills and putting them into practice, and look where it's got us.
Yeah, feels good to be out, just taking it easy, but moving and seeing a bit of the science as well.
Yeah, Runderlust is what we call it, and it's wonderful.
So if you still don't believe you're a runner, why don't you watch this video here, which is about the perfect body shape for a runner. Spoiler alert, it's not what you think it is. Or down below here is when I ran a 42-degree 50-kilometer ultra marathon in Thailand and nearly fell apart. Just a bit of enjoyment for your viewing pleasure at my, what's the word?
Expense.
At my expense. See you Sunday.